and literally using, as you did so brilliantly, this work of Le Bon from 1896. That book was we're talking about a great deal of history where you see all the pieces fit together. The motivator part to me is the wake up call to say, we have to fight this. I mean, this is a clarion call to any freedom-loving, Constitution-worshiping, God-fearing individual that's out there to roll up their sleeves and know that we cannot tire, we cannot get weary. We've got a big job ahead of us. Correct?
Oh yes, and since about halfway through my writing this book, I couldn't watch the political cable shows without seeing aspects of groupthink and riling up crowds, and it's always been a distinctive way liberals behave that conservatives don't behave. I was having dinner with a friend the other night out here, and she was in Florida during the election recount, and so she went to one of the protests. Gore was constantly, for your younger listeners, Gore lost the election, so he kept demanding recounts in certain areas of the state, certain precincts that would be favorable to him to get his numbers up, and Republicans were objecting to these pointless recounts where Democrats would steal more votes. So anyway, she's at this rally protesting the recount. And she had told me this before, I'd forgotten it, but the Republican leading the crowd with the bullhorn couldn't quite get the concept of the chant. And she used to be a liberal, so it was quite striking to her that he'd stand up with the bullhorn and say, we must stop the recount because it violates provision, blah, 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 of the Constitution. And it would just go on and on and on, and the crowd was standing there bewildered, wondering what they were supposed to chant back.
Unreal. And I found myself thinking when you talk about the chills you get when you start putting all the pieces together here that is this motivator, is when you talk about inciting a mob, it seems like what President Obama is trying to do every day. I mean, yes. Is he inciting a mob?
Yes, and to be clear, obviously some of what I'm talking about, the first quarter of the book is just a psychological mob, but the psychological mob breaks out into real mobs, and it does it frequently. We're seeing it in Wisconsin. In Montana yesterday, a bunch of liberal lunatics stormed the state capitol, banging on pots and pans, go into the governor's office, refuse to leave, march around, banging on windows, because the Democratic governor agreed to put a pipeline, an oil pipeline in the state. Needless to say, conservative speakers on college campuses see the liberal mob quite frequently. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about Glenn Beck and his family bumping into the liberal mob in a park in New York City. Mobs are, and this country went through it with the Weathermen and the SDS in the 60s. Mobs are irrational, they're childlike. Even a smart individual within a mob loses some of his intelligence, and they're dangerous. They've always been dangerous, going back to the New Testament right up through the American Revolution, and that's what gave us our country. It was a fear of a mob uprising, Shays' Rebellion, right after the American Revolution, that led the new free Americans living in their 13 Articles of Confederation to decide to come together and create one national government. That was specifically in order to keep down the mobs.
And by the way, Barack Obama, if we're to look at his resume and say, what has he done?
Exactly.
He's a community organizer. That's about the only thing he can point to, and that is
an inciter of mobs.
Yeah. So this is his MO. This is what he does, right?
Yes, and they are always dangerous. I think Americans have lost their natural aversion to mobs. It's always been understood that mobs are dangerous, and they can go from 0 to 100 in an instant. But I think Americans lost their natural aversion to mob behavior with the civil rights movement in the 60s, because here, finally was a mob protest movement on behalf of a good cause, and a cause most Americans agreed with. It's just that the Democratic Party was, in their mob-like way, appealing to the racist, segregationist mob within their own party, and so JFK and LBJ dragged their feet on enforcing civil rights victories that had been won not by mob action, but by Thurgood Marshall bringing lawsuits, taking to the Supreme Court, and winning them. Brown versus Board of Education was won in 1954. As long as a Republican was in the White House, Dwight Eisenhower, he sent the 101st Airborne to enforce the desegregation order in Little Rock. But then, unfortunately, we had a decade of Democratic presidents, and they would not enforce Thurgood Marshall's legal victories. That gave rise to Martin Luther King, and it was a good cause. But you'll notice that these days, every time liberals run out onto the street to protest something, they're always claiming this is the new civil rights movement. Well, no, it isn't. A, that was a very unique circumstance, and B, there was what was unique about the civil rights movement is also unique about the pro-life movement right now, in particular Operation Rescue. Democrats have cut off possibilities of legal change. We can't vote in our states on abortion. Thurgood Marshall's legal victories didn't mean anything because Democrats wouldn't enforce them. So Operation Rescue is similar to the civil rights movement, but nothing else is.
All right, Ann Coulter is our guest. The book is fantastic. We're going to take a quick break. Your questions for her when we come back, 855-200-1776, and I have a ton already feedback and email. We're going to go to those first because they've been waiting a long time. The book is Demonic: How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. When we come back, I'll play a card-carrying member of what our buddy Andrew Breitbart calls the Democratic Media Complex and ask Ann a question from the left that I know all these liberal hairdos are thinking on TV. Anyway, that coming up when we continue on the Scott Hennen Show on the Common Sense Club. And we're back on the Common Sense Club and the Scott Hennen Show, 22 past the hour. Okay, Ann, if you're up for this, Ann Coulter, our guest on the Common Sense Club, author of a brand new book that debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, Demonic. I'm going to play liberal card-carrying member of the establishment media and ask you the following question. And then we'll get to the listener questions here. And it's Ann, you talk about liberals here and they're maneuvering. How are conservatives any different? Isn't the Tea Party movement a mob? What would you say to that?
A bit on that in Demonic. It's actually quite fortunate that the Tea Party movement arose when it did, and liberals turned around and denounced it as a mob. So that I could make that distinction. I mean, 5 years ago it would be hard to say, now this isn't a mob, because there was really nothing like that, because conservatives tend to write books or have radio shows or write to the letters to the editor or join their local school board or whatever to affect political change. This is the first time you even had conservatives getting together to petition the government. Not every group of like-minded individuals is a mob. There are specific mob characteristics, and just straight out of the chute, there's never any violence at Tea Parties. Well, no, I retract that. There is violence, but it's always liberals coming in and attacking conservatives, as, for example, the Union thugs who were acquitted yesterday, incidentally, for their vicious beating of the black Republican Kenneth Gladney out at St. Louis. I guess it was last year, or maybe 2009 probably. They were all just acquitted yesterday. To the contrary, the Tea Partiers leave the areas where they've protested or come together to petition government cleaner than when they left. The other striking thing about the Tea Party is the contrast I make in my book is between the American and the French Revolution, which were complete opposites. The American Revolution was a revolution of Christians and thinkers and Englishmen. They were arguing their case for independence. Curiously, they didn't even demonize King George. With our founding fathers admitting that the British system was far from the worst in the world. We just wanted to go our own way and thought we could do better on our own. They made their arguments in written documents in the Declaration of Independence in volumes, which you can buy today, of Christian sermons, in Thomas Paine's Common Sense. The arguments were put out there for all to critique and argue about. That is much like today's Tea Partiers, who again are reading Common Sense. They're reading the Constitution. They're reading Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman, and they're trying to hold politicians' feet to the fire. There is nothing mob-like at all about the Tea Party. And contrast that, again, with the French Revolution, which was an atheistic, howling mob, desecrating churches, hacking priests to death. You couldn't tell where the revolution was going from one day to the next. They killed, in the course of a short revolution, the French revolutionaries killed about 600,000, 700,000 Frenchmen. And their king wasn't fighting back. They were just slaughtering them, just guillotining them en masse. It would be the equivalent in population loss of this country having a 9/11 attack every day for 7 years. And that's how many people were killed in the French Revolution.
This history gives you that motivator again, folks. By the way, speaking of Milton Friedman, his birthday is July 31st. We're going to do restoring the Republic Town Square rally in his honor, July 31st, downtown Grand Forks. Details on that coming up. All right, I only have literally 2 minutes left here, so I'm going to go really quickly, lightning round with some questions from the audience. One is, Jerry says, ask Ann, do you think we should call Obama's bluff? The things he lies about, the things he threatens will not happen, and he will look weak. He does not want to be the president that doesn't send checks to seniors or to veterans or the disabled. Call his bluff, and when these things don't happen, the people will know that he lies. He threatens. He has no honor. He's full of himself, and his policies are weakening our country. The House needs to clarify that spending is the problem, not tax revenue. Speaker Ann Coulter would do what negotiating with Barack Obama on the debt ceiling?
If I were as smart as Mitch McConnell, I'd propose his plan. I think it's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen, because it does call Obama's bluff, and it calls Obama's bluff in such a beautiful way that even Obama couldn't help but to slip and say to them yesterday, as I'm sure you've been talking about, to the Republican leaders, don't call my bluff.
Yeah.
Even he knows it. No, the problem is Republicans only have one half of one branch of government. Americans don't want their treats taken away. I mean, we're not going to solve this crisis, just so you know. I've been emailing with some of my friends about this. Oh, why can't we just cut spending on arts and NPR and foreign aid? Yeah, all of that together is less than 1% of the budget. The problem with the budget is Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. That's nearly half of the budget. In less than 10 years, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are going to be paying, will consume 92 cents of every dollar of the federal budget. And at the same time, more than 60% of Americans don't want their Social Security and Medicare touched. That's a problem. So no conservatives, you cannot sit back and say that elected Republicans should fix Social Security and Medicare while being demagogued by the Democrats and then get completely voted out of office. What McConnell's plan does, Republicans are in the impossible no-win situation right now. They propose cuts, Democrats demagogue them, and nothing ever gets cut. It would be one thing if we had the majority in the Senate and a two-thirds majority and could just do the cutting. Then we could be angry with them. But we can't. The cuts aren't going to be made, and Republicans will be voted out of office for ever having suggested these cuts. Moreover, now I thought the threat not to raise the debt ceiling was a fantastic idea, but the Democrats won't move, and they're willing to apparently collapse the economy by not cutting anything. Well, are Republicans going to have that on their head when everybody's interest rates go up to 20% on your home loans and car loans? Either way, Republicans were completely screwed here, and McConnell turned it around, moved the court from the Republicans' court into Obama's court. Fine, you can raise the debt ceiling 3 times over the next 18 months, but for the amount you raise it, you have to give us an equivalent amount in cuts. And that can't be done by just cutting the military. For one thing, Obama's not going to cut the military. He wants to be reelected too. No Democrat, and the Congress has to approve it and put it in their appropriations bills. You're not going to have Democrats voting to completely eliminate the Defense Department. And in any event, that's only $1 trillion.
Real quick, Todd wants to know: can anybody besides Chris Christie win? Are you rethinking your thought that only Chris Christie can beat Obama?
Oh, I have for months. And by the way, it made some news, so you are not following Ann Coulter closely. It was back in January, I said, if it's not Chris Christie, it's going to be Romney, and we're going to lose. And a few months later, I mean, the economy is just such a disaster, and Obama is such a disaster. I think Romney can win now. I know Chris Christie can win, but I think it's going to be Romney if it's not Christie, and I think he has a good chance of winning.
Duly updated. God bless you, Ann. Thanks for the time today. Good luck on the book.
Thank you.
Demonic. How the liberal mob is endangering America. Ann Coulter. More after this on the Common Sense Club. Don't go away.